Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the YouTube channel. Now, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about what to do when you first go back to the gym after an ACL reconstruction. Now, you might have seen my latest episode, which was talking about when it's maybe right and safe to go back to the gym. Obviously, there's a lot of context to that and your own individual circumstance. Again, it's going to be the same with regards to what to do as well. So hopefully I'll give a bit more context. I'm going to talk more generally rather than be too specific, but try and give you some specific examples depending on the type of surgery you've had, and just give an overview of what the general goal and aim is in that first stage. So normally we find that most people can go back to the gym within 6 weeks. Sometimes it can be after around 2 weeks, sometimes it can be 6 to 8 weeks. So it's really going to depend where you're at that point in time. Now, we know that the very early stages is more about recovery and regaining that extension and that range of motion and getting the swelling down. We essentially want to get you to the point where you're training normally in the gym, kind of pain-free for the most part. We know that there will be some aches and pains and some niggles for a long time, but ideally we want to get you to around that 12-week mark, 16-week mark at the latest, where you can go into the gym and you can lift weights normally without any kind of implication. And we're essentially going to try and bridge that gap between the two legs. Now, there's a lot we can do in that kind of 6 to 12-week period that really bridges that gap to normal training. So I'm going to talk you through the different kind of training methods and approaches that I often use with my clients that will get you there. So the first thing is understanding your kind of training history. Are you used to going to the gym? Are you used to lifting heavy weights? Is that normal for you, or is this a completely new experience? And obviously, essentially, what surgeries you've had and what graft you've had, because that will also dictate your entry points to training. Now, you will have lost a lot of muscle mass in that initial stage for the most part, some more than others, and that will determine how long it's going to take to regain that and obviously get back to training and rebuilding the strength. So there's a couple of things that we can use. Now, if you've got a neuromuscular electrical stimulation machine, this might be a great time to take that into the gym and use that to help facilitate muscle contractions, because we know after surgery you're going to get a lot of muscle inhibition. So if you can take that in and use that, perfect. Some of my clients don't like taking it in. Maybe they don't like being watched or drawing attention to themselves. So obviously that's going to be on you, but people don't care as much as you think. So if you need to take it in and it's going to help benefit you, then I'd highly recommend. But I like to try and simplify things for my clients in terms of, there's loads of exercises on Instagram, there's loads of different things you can do, but essentially we're trying to look at the bigger goal. The bigger goal is that we're trying to activate the muscles and regain muscle mass. Now, the best way to do that for the most part is to create what we call mechanical tension in a muscle. So we want the muscle working and burning. Now, if you felt that in the past, which you probably will have done at some point, whether that's through sport or through training, we want to try and replicate that feeling, because once you're working a muscle hard and you're getting that kind of mechanical tension within the muscle, we know that will start to stimulate muscle growth. So after surgery, we lose that ability to activate the muscle, but we also lose the central nervous system response that sends the messages to contract the muscle. So there's two parts, and we can address that part in different ways. Now, the first way is when you get back into the gym, we have a good leg that is ultimately going to be deconditioned, whether you've been off the gym for 2 weeks, 6 weeks. We know that leg is going to get a bit weaker if we don't start training it. But what we also know with the research is that if we push that leg hard and train it normally, not only can we maintain that strength, we can get a nervous system effect to the other leg without even training the other leg. So it's almost like an easy gain if we apply that principle right. So it's important for two reasons. One, obviously, to get the operated leg strong, assuming you've not had a contralateral graft, etc. We need to consider that. And two, you will keep that baseline high for the other leg, because what will happen after surgery is both legs will get weaker typically, and then we try and compare the operated leg to a deconditioned non-surgical leg. But if we can keep that leg high for as long as possible, we're now there's always going to be a bigger gap, but we're chasing that high standard rather than meeting the low standard of a deconditioned leg. And that's really what we want to do. And this is where something called cross-education training is really important. So simply, we can just do the leg press, the leg extension, and the hamstring curl, 3 to 4 sets of 5 reps, maybe leaving 2 or 3 reps in reserve. That's, if you don't know what reps in reserve, that's how many reps you've got left in the tank after you think you've got to fail, or how many reps you've got left in the tank after a given amount. So for example, if I say do 5 sets to failure, that's 0 reps in reserve. If I say do 5 reps with 3 reps in reserve, you could probably go to 8 before you fail. So obviously that's going to dictate the weight that you use. So you don't want to necessarily go all out. It doesn't have to be a to failure kind of level of effort. And this is what I did with mine. I did 3 lots of 5 reps, sometimes 4, depending on my energy levels, how I felt. And I trained that non-operated leg heavy. And I got really good strength benefits in my operated side. I think I can't remember the exact percentages, but I was hitting the return to sport strength levels within 3 to 4 months. And I suspect it was partly because of that. Now, the other thing that we want to do is, obviously, we want to regrow the muscle mass in that surgical leg. Now, you won't be able to just go into the gym and lift weights as you would do normally. So if you've, for example, had a hamstring graft, it's going to depend what access to equipment you've got. Now, I only had access to a prone hamstring curl. Absolutely no way I could have done that after 6 weeks. Whereas a lot of people, if they've got a seated curl, there's a lot less strain on the knee. You can normally do that in the 6 to 8 week mark. So if you've got access to a seated curl, which most people do, most of my clients do, we can get them on that machine as soon as possible and just start off at a lightweight and use something called blood flow restriction. Now there's not concrete evidence that it works, but I had great benefit from it. I just bought some simple cheap straps. You can get a proper cuff machine which works out the pressure, the blood flow restriction, the pressure in your leg. I was going to potentially get one of those for my main ACL reconstruction, but after my stage 1 revision surgery, I grew my quad 3 centimetres in 6 weeks, and I just thought, well, I'm not going to spend £120 on something when I've got the benefit of a £10 band for 3 centimetres in 6 weeks. So most people aren't going to go and buy proper cuffs, so I just essentially wrapped the blood flow restriction band around my leg. I did it quite tight. You can get these off Amazon for about £10. And we use the rep protocol of 30 reps on your first set. So you might start with a light weight, 15, 15, 15. Now you're not going to hit those numbers exactly. It might be 27 or it might be 33 on the first one before you get to failure or you can't do any more. And then you do 15, 15, 15. That might look like 17, 14, 13. That's fine. As long as you're training at the right intensity, that's what we want. And it was different for me every time I went into the gym. Obviously, energy levels, etc., different factors will influence that. So for me, I just did that twice a week. It was on a Wednesday, on a Sunday, went into the gym and I was doing leg press, leg extension, a hamstring exercise and calf exercises. They're essentially the 4 muscle groups that we want to train. And if we do that well with those 4 exercises, we're going to start to rebuild muscle mass. So it's really important that you start to get that quad working in a knee dominant press. I really struggled initially to put full weight through my right knee. I had a pain on the inside, but I could get a good muscle burn by doing a split stance technique. So if you can do purely single leg, great, because you can just adjust the weight accordingly and then we can really isolate that leg. If you can't, then split stance is a good one to start with to get your confidence, and then just build up to a point where you can then get confident getting full load through your leg. You probably have to reduce the weight when you do that from a split stance to purely single. That doesn't matter. We don't care about the weight right now. We just care about that bigger goal of stimulating the muscle and starting to get that adaptation so we can grow the muscle essentially, because we know that a bigger muscle is going to have more potential to be stronger further down the line. And then that's where we can start to get more specific. Now, if you've had a patella graft or a quad graft, even a hamstring graft, you might struggle to go straight in and start doing leg extensions, which is fine and that's normal. So you might start with isometrics, you might do partial range extensions, you might start double leg, but the goal is essentially to get to single leg so you can really load that leg up. And again, the same with the hamstring. If you don't have access to a seated curl, you can do maybe a ball exercise where you lie on your back and you curl a ball to you, and you're essentially again trying to get that muscle working. You might start on 2 legs to single legs. The sooner we can get to single leg, in my opinion, start isolating that leg, the quicker that will adapt and feel normal and better. I'm not too big of a fan of double leg exercises if there's a single leg option and you can tolerate it. And this is where machines are great. So you might struggle doing a single leg sit to stand because it's full body weight, but you might be able to do 20-30 kilograms on a leg press and really isolate and stimulate that knee joint and that muscle. And that's where you can really start making progress. So they're essentially the two main tools, along with the Compex, if you're happy to take that in, where you're essentially building up that strength and you're trying to bridge that gap. So you've got heavy loads on the good leg, the non-operated leg. If you're not confident doing 5 reps, by all means, you can reduce the weight and do higher volumes. You might do 12 reps, but as heavy as possible, as heavy as you're confident of doing. And then, like I say, we're trying to essentially bridge that gap to train normally in the operated leg so we can start to try and push the weight. So in that early stage, we're starting around the 15 rep mark. We want to keep the weight fairly low, but the reps quite high because the knee joint just won't tolerate heavy loads. But we know with blood flow restriction, it can tolerate lighter loads. It's just finding that entry point. And that's the most important concept. Find your entry point, work the muscle, make it burn, not avoid pain, but avoid aggravating the pain. Some pain is normal. Again, it's still acute. It's going to be a little bit raw. But I use a pain framework with my guys where I essentially say, don't let pain go above 3-4 out of 10. Monitor your 24-hour response. Make sure the pain isn't escalating within the session. If it is, maybe you just need to back off. And that's just where you're at the minute, and then you revisit it. And if your body's adapting, you're going to notice improvements with that as you go further along the rehab process. So that 6-week mark from essentially week 6 to week 12 is really important to bridge that gap. And if you do that well, that's where you can really hit the ground running and essentially get back to a normal training plan from week 12 to, say, week 18, and then be close to hitting your numbers for introducing jumping impact work, ready for a return to run. So most people I find will return to run around the 4 or 5 month mark if they've done everything well in the early stages. Again, depending on your surgery type, if you've had a meniscus repair, it might be a little bit slower. But once you're out of the brace, if you've had one and you've got no restriction, you can then really focus on pushing those early stage goals. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context in terms of what gym training looks like. There's other bits you can do around that, but your main core gym workouts are ideally machine based and like I say, lifting heavy on the non-operated leg, muscle burn on the operated leg, and really trying to bridge that gap. And then you can introduce balance, gait drills, etc. around that. But this is more about the core gym work. So essentially leg press, leg extension, hamstring curl, calf work. If you do that consistently, you train hard, then you're not going to be too far off where you need to be around that 12-week mark. And like I say, you can start adding more things in to get more specific at that point. So hopefully this episode was useful. Any questions, then drop them in the comments. Obviously hit the subscribe button if you're finding this useful. If you're interested in working with me, then my Instagram account is rickwilliams_ACL coach. Just feel free to drop me a message and I'd be happy to chat.